Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Simply Street English podcast. Welcome. You're here to listen to some English from me, Jake. I'm your host. I welcome you again. I don't know why I keep doing that. You're just very welcome to be here. The idea of this podcast is just to give you a weekly dose of some spoken English from me because I speak native English and not a lot else. It's a little bit simpler as well than kind of common or usual normal English. So if you're at the level where you're just learning to listen and differentiate and understand spoken English, then this is perfect for you. If you're more advanced, I can do quicker episodes occasionally, but this is mostly for you if you're around a B1, maybe B2 level. If you're a complete beginner though, it's okay to listen because you'll get a kind of a feel for the language. So stick around if you like the sound of that then. So just want to quickly thank two new patrons on Patreon. Thank you to Liz joining up and also Anastasia, or Anastasia as I would say probably in English. Welcome both. Thank you for supporting the podcast. If you want to support the podcast yourself, go and check it out on patreon.com/simplystreetenglish, and I'd love to have you there. If you enjoy this podcast, don't feel like you have to support on Patreon, but it is appreciated. So let's have a little. I'll introduce today's topic. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about how I learned Spanish, and I hope that it is interesting. You perhaps learn a few more words, a few new words I should say in English, and it's just, like I said, interesting, and I hope it will help you in your journey to learn English as well. So obviously I didn't have to learn English as a second language because it's my mother tongue, but Spanish, yes, absolutely, I have had to learn that. So get relaxed, sit down, chill out, or whatever you're doing, running, washing up, and enjoy the podcast. So let's start at the beginning. I have always loved languages. I just think they're so cool. You can talk to people in different ways and with obviously different words. And when I was young, I thought it was funny to speak about people in a sneaky kind of way. Sneaky, so like being a little bit naughty, I guess. Not saying nasty things, but like if I had a friend who spoke a different language and we could say something together and other people didn't understand, it was like, oh, that's so cool. It's a little bit silly because you shouldn't talk about people. It's like, I guess, if you're playing football or sport and you can say like, pass me the ball, or I'm going to get in the box real quick, and then do you know what I mean? It's like tactical as well. Anyway, I thought languages were really cool. So at school, I would download apps to like learn phrases in like French or Spanish or Italian, like whatever. But in school, I didn't learn Spanish very well because I thought, it's just, trying to get a grade or something. And so I didn't do very well in school to get, or in Spanish, sorry. And our grading system at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but it was like A, B, C, D, E, etc. And I just about scraped a C. To scrape something, right, is when you just about pass something. You nearly fail, but you just about get in there, okay? To scrape something. It's also like when you scrape down your car, like in the winter when there's ice on it. Literally, you use a tool to scrape. So I scraped by in Spanish. But I really loved the language. I really liked having different ways to communicate. So I probably made my Spanish teacher very sad when I didn't choose it for A level. So that's the thing after GCSEs in England and probably the rest of the UK. But what I did do was I studied it at university. half of my degree was Spanish. So, yeah, I think my love for languages preceded or came before, obviously, any formal training or learning of it. In school, I remember being a little bit bored with the way that we learn, because you learn things like, I'm going to the cinema with a friend. I think it's something like, voy al cine con mis amigos, or voy al cine, depending on where you go. So I go to the cinema. I thought that was a bit boring, maybe, and just sitting in a classroom I didn't enjoy. But I did enjoy learning and listening to songs, and just knowing that I could learn a little bit more. I don't know, it was exciting. I think obviously where it started to get easier, where I started to learn it properly was university. We had to sit down and do grammar exercises, listening, and it really felt like it took a long time to click, right? And to click in this sense means for it all to come into place, for it to become something that made sense. And so I'd say one of the biggest challenges was persevering, keeping on trying to learn. So I listened to a lot of podcasts and stuff, just lots of input, and I wasn't really getting it, and you had to learn some grammar. But I would say that, like, with more time and more immersion and more practice, it started to click, What I remember doing was learning whole phrases. I would watch videos on YouTube of people asking questions, and I would take that question and then ask it to a Spanish person or whoever that could speak the language, and then just listening to the response. And maybe I didn't understand everything that they said, but by learning whole phrases, I learned it in context. So there were words that came up which I didn't learn in isolation, but learned them with the rest of the conversation. For example, I went to Costa Rica as part of my university degree and chatted to people on the beach once. We were walking somewhere as a group, and I asked the guide, I said something like, if you weren't a teacher or whatever he was, I can't remember what I said, what would you be? I just remember that, like, actually doing that. I think it was something like, si no fuera un maestro, ¿qué serías? Like, what would you be, right? I literally learned that phrase, and I didn't know whether it was conditional or like subjunctive or anything like that. I just learned how to say it. And I just remember that time, it just clicking. Like, I understood what he said, and he responded. And so it was like, what I learned was, learn some phrases and then just say them to people and see what comes back. And eventually, right, with more immersion and more practice, it just clicks into place. And when you have that first moment where you can follow along, follow a conversation, it feels amazing. I don't really remember the first time I had a proper conversation in Spanish, because since then I've had quite a few conversations. But I was having to use the language in real life because I did a bit of teaching, and if the students wanted to hear what my Spanish was like, they would really test me. They would talk to me and actually just teach me new words in the process, and then we'd get back to speaking English because that was part of the lesson, obviously. So I would just say, right, that the more you practice, especially trying to speak with people, once you've got a decent level to be able to understand what people say back to you, then just practice as much as possible, and one day it just clicks into place. Now, one regret I have with Spanish is now I think it's been like between 5 to 10 years, perhaps something crazy like that, since I lived in Spain for 9 months. So yeah, I also lived there, like I said. And in that time, I haven't really listened to it or tried to keep up the language. consistently during that whole time. I've done bits and bobs and been back to Spain a little bit. Bits and bobs means little bits here and little parts there, okay? So I've done bits and bobs of Spanish, but I have not been consistent. So I want to resolve to change that. I'm trying to listen to more, some every day, just to try and maintain my level of at least understanding of the spoken language, so that when I travel to Spain or if I meet someone who speaks Spanish, I can at least understand what they say. But yes, that's a little side note. I regret not kind of maintaining the level over the last few years. One moment, I need to have a swig of coffee. That's yummy. Cold coffee today because it's like 30 degrees outside today, which is amazing for the UK. Right, back to the topic. How I studied was a mixture of watching videos, for example, just any YouTube videos. I did do a bit of Duolingo, but I don't think Duolingo's the best way to learn. Just essentially watching YouTube videos, because you see the context and you can read the subtitles, and just putting that time and effort in, it was much better and much easier. I prefer it to perhaps just other methods, really. But yeah, instead of like memorizing grammar and trying to do this, that, or the other, you should learn a little bit of grammar. Because, for example, preterite, I think it was. I remember learning, I was like, okay, this is preterite, right? So you talk about one action that happened in the past once. And then when I was speaking to people in Spain, it's like you hear these things coming up again and again and again. Like, this person told me, he told me, me dijo, like he said. It came up all the time in conversation, and it just really cemented it in my head. And I was like, that's how you use that. At least from my memory, I think that's what that's called. Anyway, that's part of how I learned Spanish. Just listening to the language spoken, and it's all about context, like I've said. I would say as well, my confidence grew over time. So I felt like I was improving, perhaps slowly, very slowly. And it doesn't matter about people around you, whether they're doing better or worse, because on my course there were people who were much, much better, and there were people that actually gave up and never continued with Spanish. You have to just deal with where you were at. So what I had to do was look at myself and say, okay, do I know more than before? Yes, no? And the answer is yes. If you keep learning, you will know more than before. I think my speaking and listening just got better over time. So spending time with locals when I was in Spain for those 9 months, playing football with people, spending time eating together. I even went to a Spanish church there and had some really good friends there. And just spending time with people in the language, it was just so good. And like, it comes after a while, and you can just be part of the conversation, be part of the culture. And I would say though, it got quite tiring because you have to really think about what you're saying. I think with a longer time in the country, you can say what you want to be able to say and articulate yourself. Articulate means to make yourself understood. It's also a great board game. Look it up, Articulate, because it's about telling people what's on the card without using the word. So you have to be able to articulate yourself, okay? Make yourself understood. And in my mother tongue, English, it's way easier to say whatever I want to say. However, in another language, of course, you have to just really think about what you say, and even though it's a bit tiring, that's what you have to do. I wouldn't say there was any like real breakthrough moments, but it is just like a case of you look back in you look back over the past and you go, wow, I never used to be able to understand this, but now I can. It's like you don't see how much improvement you're making until you look back over time. I have got some interesting things to share with you about language learning now and what language I'm going to be learning, or I am learning now. I've done it for 6 months now and it's quite interesting. The results are quite interesting, but that's for another episode, okay? Gonna keep on with the Spanish for now. So, any funny moments or culture shocks? Let me see if I can think of anything. Remember, this podcast sometimes is a little bit, I like to just speak because then you just hear what comes out of my head, and that's what native speakers use in the moment. I don't like to prepare too much. I've got some questions. So here we go. Cultural differences. I think people are quite laid back in Spain, which is really nice. People are not on time for things per se. So like, if it's a meeting or something, yes, people are on time, or school. But for like gatherings and stuff, it's okay to be 10 or 15, 20 minutes late. I say late. It's just whenever you get there. It was quite relaxed, really. People were very open with each other. Lots of hugging. People would kiss on the cheek as well. And just like very warm culture. Once, right, okay, I've got a funny moment. Once I tried to say something like, in England we don't have any preservatives or something in our bread. I can't remember exactly what I said. We don't have preservatives or something. And I got the word for preservative and condom mixed up in Spanish, and I said we don't have any condoms in our bread. Ay, that was embarrassing. However, it was funny because in the context, my friends knew what I meant, I think, after I explained. But they were really kind because it's like, you've got that wrong there, but you never make that mistake again, you know? You go, yep, that was a false friend. That word didn't mean what I thought it did. So you learn by sometimes embarrassing yourself, but we do that in English as well. You do that in your native language. You can probably think of a time when you were young and you used the wrong word or the wrong context. It happens, and that's how you learn. We make mistakes. So partly what kept me going was making mistakes and learning from them. And mistakes are not a bad thing. Mistakes mean that you are doing something. So if you're around friends in their native language and you make a mistake, good friends will laugh with you. They won't laugh at you. But you will learn from the context, and you won't make those mistakes again. And they make very funny anecdotes. They make very fun stories. An anecdote is like a small story. So they make fun stories. And they can help you to keep going with the language, because you say, right, I made that mistake, but I learned from it. And if you learn, you carry on and you get better at the language. In terms of goals for the language, my only goal was just to learn it because it was fun. I wasn't doing it for a job or to be able to speak to people when I traveled or any kind of connection to the language. I mean, all of those things can be a good motivation. For example, now I can speak to people, more or less, when I travel. But to be honest with you, like, my motivation was just because it was fun to learn. Let me think now. Right, where am I at now? I would say my understanding of spoken Spanish is decent. It's okay. So I'm probably a B2 level. My spoken Spanish is not amazing. I don't spend a lot of time practicing or talking with people here. I've just let it kind of fall by the wayside a little. That means to let it slip a bit, to not be practicing regularly. So I definitely need to practice speaking Spanish way more often. I would say that I'm still fluent though. I'm not super fluent. I'm not a native, but I can have a half decent conversation with someone, especially if they have very bad English. I remember once I was in hospital, just chilling at the reception, going for an appointment, and a lady walked in who couldn't speak any English. I don't know how she got here or what she was doing. Fair play to her. But I was like, oh, can I help you? I'll talk to the reception for you. Obviously in whatever Spanish I was using at the time. And that felt really cool. I was like, yes, that's why I learned this language, so I can use it. And that was cool. But often Spanish speakers, especially if they're in the UK or traveling, often they have a good level of English. But I found that when I was in Spain, not many people spoke good English, just in general, which was cool because I got to practice a lot more often. I would say Spanish has changed my life as well. Not like crazy amount, but like a decent amount. It was my first language that I learned after my mother tongue, so it really showed me that I'm able to learn languages. It helped me to get a job, even though the job was in English. The boss came in and said, "Do you speak Spanish?" I was like, "Yeah." It says on your CV you speak Spanish. I was like, "Yeah, I can get by." And he spoke to me in Spanish, and I replied, and we had a little conversation, and I got the job. Now it helped that I got a good grade at uni, but also he wanted to check to see if I was lying, and I wasn't lying. So small tip for you there: don't lie on your CV, because I would have been caught out if I hadn't been truthful. To be caught out is when someone catches you in a lie or in something that you did wrong or something, right? So I didn't get caught out because I was doing the right thing. You may have heard my phone go off then. I usually have it in silent. I don't know what I'm doing. Right, turn off. Nearly finished here. It's been about 20 minutes. I think that's a good amount of time for you to listen to spoken English. So I won't go on for too much longer. But here's some advice for you if you are still with me and listening and still learning English. I would say just keep persevering, keep trying, do a little bit every day. Even when you're not motivated, just try and be disciplined, because one day it will click for you. Like, it will just take a lot of time, okay? Don't worry about being perfect. Speak and listen as much as you can, and your mistakes are actually your best teacher. Like I said, you remember those mistakes and you don't often make them again, especially if they're very embarrassing. Cool. I think that's all I really need to say. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you stay learning English. Keep enjoying it. That's a super important point. And as it's Friday, have a great weekend. Listen to some interesting English podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one. All right. Ciao.